I think the journey that we've had in terms of using tech across our schools is born out of the necessity of a lot of our youngsters don't have the advantage that perhaps my own children enjoyed and I'd seen other children enjoy. So I think when I came here a long time ago, probably longer than I'm willing to admit, there was a blank canvas, but there clearly were some hungry youngsters who wanted to do better. There was a apprehensive staff who actually did a lot of the care things they did really well, a lot of the basic provision they did really well, but they were pretty much risk averse. They'd had very little institutional success, and actually what they needed was an architecture on which to build a better form of delivery, but also to build their confidence. So technology gave me that architecture. So in the early days of being in Shireland, what we could do is build a series of structures where staff could be brave, they could be different, but they knew that if they fell, something would catch them. And that's a fundamentally different position than most schools. We support a whole raft of schools in terms of school improvement. And obviously we bring schools into our trust to improve them. Quite often people feel they can do that heroically. I think our view is you can't, you have to do it structurally. And what technology has given us are those structures over the years. So in the early days in Shireland, we built that around getting a much higher level of provision, but also bringing in things like integrated learning systems, which now sound incredibly outdated, where that system would make a decision at a very low level to deliver some learning content to youngsters. The scary bit was, I think for staff and for the children, was we delivered it into home. What I think we've managed to do using technology is build a confident structure. One of the biggest issues there is in terms of school improvement is creating institutional confidence. It's really hard to do. We still have a government view that much of the school improvement can be hung around projects. And actually, our opinion is it can't. It has to be hung around structure and people and what you deliver. So what we've done fairly successfully over the years is create that architecture and those series of architectures. The first thing that we will do when we go into a new school is put in an Office 365 architecture everywhere. We'll then train the staff. We'll give all staff a touchscreen device. We'll standardise on a series of solutions. So again, it is architectural. So in our secondaries, we put ViewSonic boards across the estate. We will put one-to-one devices in secondaries across the estate. We'll standardise on everybody will use Power BI across all the primary and secondary schools, again across our trust. So what you've got is you've got a series of touchstones, but you've also got a series of things to train to work with, and also expect people to use. The biggest frustration for me over the last couple of decades is that nationally we went down a pathway of expecting our staff and our institutions to use technology. And then for some unknown reason, we decided that actually we wouldn't mandate that, but we would mandate other silly structures. And it diluted all of the expectation that there was nationally. In the early 2000s, mid 2000s, there was an expectation that every school in this country would have a learning platform. And what that did is that started a series of conversations that sadly we lost. And I think when we saw this, probably in its most dramatic, was at the beginning of COVID, where nationally we continued to expect schools to use learning platforms and think about what they delivered to youngsters both inside and outside of school, then nationally we would have been so much better prepared to actually deliver the quality education that we should have been able to deliver in COVID. Embarrassingly, other countries that in the early 2000s came to see us and were hugely envious of what we have, they didn't pause it and they continue to do it. And I suspect, and I know, they were better prepared for COVID than we were, and that simply shouldn't have been the case. The other bit that should make you want to look at technology from an architectural perspective is it ought to be able to be a bit like gas and electricity, in that you should be able to see it a bit like a utility and just rely upon it and then build your structure around it. And therefore what you ought to have is a workforce that know how to exploit it, manipulate it, deviate from it, and personalise it for youngsters. That workforce we don't quite have. The irony is that workforce at home can use the very technologies that in school they lack confidence to deploy. And that's just a nonsense. And we have to do some work around that. So most of our work across our trust starts architecturally and very rapidly becomes very personal. And technology lets us do that in a way that without it, I simply wouldn't be able to do. And then if you overlay on top of that a group of staff who feel that actually they can get the best out of technology and that actually they can take risks, and then you suddenly start to see that confidence make a difference to results, make a difference to experiences, make a difference to the levels of engagement. There are days where I actually feel I'm almost running a zoo, in that we seem to have an awful lot of visitors and we take them around and they always want to see the best exhibit. Actually, quite often when people come here, I'm not sure whether they leave inspired or they leave disappointed, because what we try and do is bring it down to a mundane level of, actually, the best thing we do here is make technology mundanely clever. When they produce the program, or we produce the program, they want to see our immersive space, they want to see what we do in terms of one-to-one devices. That isn't where the conversation actually sits. The conversation always sits with the curriculum, and then it sits with assessment. It sort of moves to Power BI and talks about not the cleverness of Power BI, but actually the surfacing of data in the easiest, most simple, but most inclusive way. So actually, where lots of people visit, I think, from an agenda of awe and wonder, they probably leave with mundane boredom, in that they actually go away and think, I could do that. And that's really what we should be doing. We should actually be able to get people in who look at what we do and can see actually how easily replicable it is. I think if you're going to do that, though, there are several bits. One, pick replicable and simple technologies. Pick good partners to work with. I think one of the things that schools get horribly wrong at times is they see a niche solution that looks amazing and will affect 5% of their cohort. What we advise people to do is don't look for that. Look for the big wins. Look for the ones that will change hearts and minds. Look for the ones that actually all staff can have an input in. Won't all be the same, and the output won't always be the same. And you don't want it to be, but actually everybody can see their place in it. So there is an inclusivity using technology that I'm not sure we've really explained to school leaders particularly well, but it's something we need to do. Our trust is leading in this area in terms of a priority education investment area. The opportunity of the PEIA area is that actually it brings maintained schools and academy trusts together across all the phases and across the different forms of school to work together on something. Their biggest challenge is they're not used to working together. So one of the bits that we started the conversation with is you cannot improve the school system without a mechanism to allow people to collaborate, to share, to really push the boundaries. So we've worked with a series of tech companies where we know we can use their solution our way for our children, but we can rely on the stability and the thought that's behind the back of that solution. And that's an interesting phase that we're in at the moment, because I think we are finally getting to the point that people's confidence of using technology in their own home means they're brave enough to see that actually it could be used in that very structural way in school. So people who come always want to see the clever stuff. I think our cleverest stuff is the stuff that's actually probably the most mundane bits. And they always will be those architectural things that allow schools to fly based on something that actually catches them and allows them to do those really brave things that kids remember for all of their lives.